Let's move on to our third main topic today. And our third main topic today gets sent in to us by Rick Little, who writes, with the whole Sony situation and Spider-Man, where does this leave his villains as far as Mysterio and Vulture? Are they owned by Sony as well, or will they stay in the MCU? Seems like they left the door open for a Mysterio and Vulture return. All right, first of all, thanks a lot for the question, Rick. And Rob, I only saw Spider-Man Far From Home 3 times. Mysterio can't return. I mean, it's the MC fake death universe. I guess they can do anything they want.
Dude, he was a hologram. The whole time.
The whole time it was. All right, so this does raise a question. Look, first of all, there's going to be a lot of questions being raised around the whole Spider-Man IP. Now that everything's fallen apart between Disney and Sony, they've now gone their separate ways. And by the way, thank you, Sony and Disney, for giving us 5 films with that partnership. I liked each and every one of them, and I look forward to see what you're each going to do moving forward. That said, we've had a lot of questions coming in lately. It's like, wait a minute, Can Disney do a Spider-Man Disney Plus show? Animated, yes. Live action, no. Can Sony continue to do, they were planning an animated series themselves. Can they still do that? As far as I understand, no. But there's a lot of different questions like that are being raised. This is an interesting one. What can or can't you do as far as Mysterio or Vulture goes? To the extent of my understanding of the deal, and I've talked to a couple of people about this, but I can't 100% guarantee that this is accurate, but this is everything I understand, and I want to hear from you guys if you understand differently. The Vulture character is under the Spider-Man deal. Mm-hmm. And remember that even though Marvel kind of made that Spider-Man movie, it was all paid for by Sony, which means anything that gets introduced in that movie belongs to Sony. That's part of the big reason why Sony did not want to let Disney become co-financers of their films. So Sony retains all the rights to these things. Anyway, so as far as my understanding goes, that means that this character, number one, belongs to Sony. And if they want to bring back Michael Keaton as Vulture, if Michael Keaton wants to do that, and if he's under contract and all that kind of stuff, then as far as I know, that's exactly what will happen. They can still use the Vulture character. Same is true if they want to hold to the philosophy of the fake death universe. And if they want to have Mysterio and Jake Gyllenhaal back, theoretically speaking, they can do that. They won't be able to mention his connection to Tony Stark anymore or anything like that, but they could still theoretically bring him in. So the extent of my understanding, Rob, here is basically that. Yeah. If Sony wants to use Michael Douglas as Vulture, Michael Keaton, Michael Douglas would be a totally different thing. If they did want to use Michael Keaton as Vulture and Michael Keaton's up for it, yep, nothing's stopping them. That's the extent of my understanding on that. Rob, how do you see it?
I see it exactly the same way you did. I mean, from what I understand, Vulture was always part of the Spider-Man universe, created in the pages of Spider-Man. It makes sense to me that, and remember, both of those movies were released by Sony. I mean, they were developed in conjunction with Marvel, but they're Sony movies. And why couldn't they bring back those characters within the Sony pantheon of Spider-Man? I mean, there's no reason why they couldn't do that. And I think, do they? I don't like to see villains returning over and over and over again all the time unless you have a great story. However, in the case of what they did with Vulture, I really like Michael Keaton's portrayal. I think the relationship Spider-Man had with his daughter, and I really think that it would be valuable for, I mean, what better way than to, in one way, you're giving people the familiar, but you're announcing a new, like we're reclaiming Vulture and we're going to do something different with him. They're already setting up the Sinister Six. They've added him as part of that, as we saw at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming. I really like Michael Keaton, and I thought he was a pretty nuanced villain for the MCU, and I'd like to see him come back. So, in my mind, I would love to see that.
Yeah, and they did kind of leave it feeling like he has unfinished business, but which way does he go? They left that a little bit mysterious as well. Aaron, when you're looking at a situation like this, and we see the Sony departure and all that kind of stuff, number one, do you think that, I believe that, yeah, he still does belong to Sony, but number two, given everything, do you think it would be a good idea for them to bring him back?
Absolutely, especially when you have, I really like what Robert was saying. First of all, Michael Keaton I'm so thrilled about his reemergence in Hollywood. He's such a phenomenal actor, and people want to see him in this genre. I also like what Robert was saying about keeping the threads connected while they're starting a new expansion. And that's going to be something that's going to hold that audience, make the audience go, okay, this isn't totally unfamiliar territory. I'm not being scared off by not having all of my characters. Spider-Man's just not walking around with all these new people. You know, you're keeping the threads of the familiar while then expanding into the new territory, which I really like. And I'm really fascinated by what you said. So you said that they can't even mention Tony Stark's name because is the sheer mention of the name something that's part of the IP?
Yeah, because that's a fictional character that belongs. They can't pretend that character exists in their universe. They got to keep that completely separate, so they can't mention that.
Interesting. So that'll be a fascinating journey of how they close up some of those loopholes without mentioning any of those names. Like if there is. It'll just be very interesting. The fact that Spider-Man's just never going to mention his buddy Tony Stark again. Okay.
Well, he's dead. That makes it easier.
Well, I mean,
that makes it easier.
I mean, a little tragic, but yeah.
A little tragic. Went a little dark there. Question is, guys, what do you think about that? If we accept the understanding that, Sony is completely able to still use that character and bring Michael Keaton back if he so chooses, do you think it would be a good idea for them to do that? Or do you think it would be a good idea for them just to move on from that character and just head in a different direction? What do you guys see as the pros and cons of that? Jump down to the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. All right.